My story didn't start under the bright lights of the grand arena. It began in the dust, in the forgotten corners of the outlands, where hope is a currency few can afford. I was just another kid with calloused hands and a fire in my belly. Every day, I'd watch the sky, imagining the roar of the crowd, the weight of a championship belt around my waist. I wasn't born a champion. I trained when the sun was a merciless hammer in the sky. I trained when the moons were cold, silent witnesses to my sweat and my pain. My knuckles bled from punching solid rock. My muscles screamed with every push, every lift. My first real fight was in a grimy pit, the air thick with the smell of cheap ale and desperation. My opponent was a brute, twice my size, with a scar that split his eyebrow in two. The crowd wasn't cheering for me. They were betting against me. But when that bell rang, they saw something else. They saw a storm they never expected. I was faster, smarter, and hungrier. Every blow I landed was a testament to those lonely nights of training. When his massive body hit the floor, a strange silence fell over the pit. It was the silence of shock. I stood there, chest heaving, my fist raised not in arrogance, but in a declaration. This was only the beginning. That night, I walked away with a few coins and a priceless lesson. Respect isn't given, it's taken. It's earned with blood, sweat, and an unbreakable will. The dream was no longer just a flicker in the darkness. It was a growing flame, and it was about to set the world on fire. I was on my way. The pit fights became my proving ground. Each victory was a stepping stone, each opponent a new lesson in the brutal art of combat. I climbed the ranks, not with flashy tricks, but with pure, unadulterated power and relentless hard work. My name started to be whispered in the taverns and the marketplaces. They called me the Rock of the Outlands. The kid who came from nothing was becoming something. I faced a sorcerer who hurled fireballs. I walked through the flames. I battled a four-armed behemoth. I broke every one of them. My style was simple. Anchor yourself, find your focus, then unleash hell. The transition from the grimy pits to the polished stone of the preliminary tournament arenas was a shock to the system. The lights were brighter, the stakes were higher, the warriors were deadlier. My first match was against a cybernetic ninja, a blur of chrome and steel. He was fast, impossibly fast. But I remembered my training. I anchored myself. I let his storm of attacks crash against me, learning his rhythm. I wasn't just a brawler anymore, I was a tactician. I learned to read my opponents, to exploit their weaknesses, to turn their own strengths against them. I would spend hours studying ancient scrolls, learning about different fighting styles from across the realms. I combined the brute force of the Outlands with the disciplined techniques of the Order of Light. I became a hybrid, a new breed of warrior that no one had an answer for. The commentators started talking. They said I had a champion's heart. They were right. One by one, they fell. The elemental master who commanded ice and wind, the shadowy assassin who moved like a phantom, the beast tamer with his savage creatures. Each fight was a war, and each victory was a landmark on my journey. I never celebrated for long. The moment one opponent was defeated, my focus shifted to the next. The work was never done. The mountain was still there to be climbed. I was getting stronger, faster, and smarter. The legend was no longer being whispered. It was being shouted from the stands. Something incredible started to happen. The roar of the crowd began to change. At first, it was just a generic noise, the sound of a mob hungry for violence. But soon, I started to hear my name. Chants of "Rock, Rock, Rock." Fans would wait for hours just to catch a glimpse of me, to get an autograph on a piece of parchment, to touch the hand that had defeated so many giants. They saw their own struggles in me. They saw the kid from the dust who dared to dream, and it gave them hope. Their energy became my energy. And then, there were the girls. Admiring glances from the stands, shy waves as I left the arena, princesses, sorceresses, elite guards. They weren't just drawn to the victories or the fame. They were drawn to the focus, the discipline, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've earned your place. They saw the warrior, but they also saw the man behind the fight. The one who still remembered the taste of dust and the sting of being underestimated. It was a new kind of challenge, one I hadn't trained for, but I handled it with respect and a smile. My inner circle began to form. Loyal friends who had been with me from the start. They weren't just yes men. They were the ones who would tell me the hard truths, who would keep me grounded when the cheers were at their loudest. We would celebrate victories, but more importantly, we would analyze every fight, looking for ways I could be better, stronger. This wasn't just my journey anymore, it was ours. We were a team, a family, bound by loyalty and a shared vision of reaching the absolute pinnacle of greatness. The fame was a powerful force. It could build you up, but I knew it could also tear you down if you let it. I never forgot where I came from. Every morning I would wake up and train with the same intensity as that kid in the Outlands. The roar of the crowd was electrifying, and the attention was flattering, but none of it mattered more than the work. The work was what got me here. The work was what would take me to the final victory. As my star rose, a dark shadow was cast from the opposite side of the tournament bracket. His name was spoken in hushed, fearful tones. He was the reigning champion, a vile and arrogant tyrant who called himself the Wonka. He ruled the arena not with honor but with cruelty and disdain. He didn't just defeat his opponents, he humiliated them, breaking their spirits as much as their bodies. He saw the sport as his personal playground and everyone else as his toys. His skill was undeniable, a twisted and sadistic form of combat that was brutally effective, but his soul was rotten to the core. The Wonka saw my rise not as a challenge, but as an insult. He couldn't stand the cheers I received, the respect I had earned. In his mind, all adoration belonged to him. He began to taunt me from afar, using the post-fight interviews to mock my origins, to belittle my victories. He called me a dust-kicking peasant and a muscle-bound fool. He promised that when we finally met, he would not only beat me but would make an example of me, sending me crawling back to the dirt where I belonged. His words were poison, but I refused to let them infect me. I let my fists do the talking. Our paths were set on a collision course. The tournament became a two-man story. The people's champion versus the tyrannical king. The entire world was watching, picking sides. He represented everything I stood against. Arrogance, cruelty, unearned privilege. I represented everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough. The night before the final, the arena was quiet. I stood in the center, looking up at the empty seats, imagining them filled with thousands of screaming fans. I would not fail. I would break the Wonka, the final match. The air crackled with energy. Millions watched from across the realms as I walked the long path to the center of the arena. The crowd's roar was deafening, a physical force that vibrated through my bones. On the other side, the Wonka made his entrance, oozing arrogance. He basked in the booze, feeding off the hatred like a parasite. Our eyes locked across the stone floor. There were no more words, no more taunts. This was it, the culmination of a lifetime of work, pain, sacrifice, all distilled into this one moment. The bell rang, and the world held its breath. The fight was a symphony of destruction. The Wonka was as good as they said. Cheap shots, devastatingly powerful, unorthodox strikes. He was dirty, using every trick in the book to gain an advantage. For the first few rounds, he had me on the defensive, landing painful blows that tested my endurance. He laughed, thinking he was breaking me, but he didn't understand. He didn't realize that I was born in pain. I was molded by it. For me, it was just a reminder that I was still alive and still in the fight. I found my anchor. I weathered his storm. I took his best shots, and I was still standing. A look of confusion, then fear flashed in his eyes. That's when I made my move. I unleashed the full force of my power, every ounce of strength I had forged in the dust and fire of the Outlands. My fists were like pistons, my kicks like falling trees. The fight turned. The crowd sensed it, their chants for rock, 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 becoming a unified, thunderous roar. The final blow was a culmination of everything. It was for the dream. It was for the fans. It was for every single person he had ever bullied and belittled. I unleashed a final, devastating combo that sent him crashing to the canvas, unconscious before he even landed. Silence. Then an explosion of sound unlike anything I had ever heard. I had done it. The kid from the dust was now the Khan, the ultimate champion, a legend forever.